The smell of charred ribs wafted through the docking bay, drawing a line of suspicion through the sterile air. Commander Issac Weller flipped the rack over with a pair of tongs that had clearly seen better days, sizzling fat hissing as it kissed the open flame of his portable grill. "This is not sanctioned," the alien said flatly. Isaac didn't look up. "Neither was your hovercraft landing on my tomato patch last week, Var. But here we are." Var loomed, a spindly creature with skin the color of rusted copper and eyes too large for its narrow head. It didn't sit so much as fold itself, knees near its shoulders, watching with the kind of revulsion a person might reserve for roadkill soup. "You were roasting meat from the quadrant 6 ungulate," Var said. "Yup. That meat is poisonous." Isaac jabbed the thermometer into the thickest part of the ribs and waited. "Not if you cook it long enough. It's safe." Var's eye tendrils constricted. "You are gambling your digestive tract on a hypothesis." Isaac chuckled and set the tongs down. "Nope. I'm banking on 300 degrees and 30 minutes per pound. Been eating this stuff since we landed. Just had to figure out the enzyme breakdown timing." Var stared at the grill like it might explode. Which, in fairness, it had done once. But that was a grease fire and a fluke, not a pattern. "You do not possess the biological resistance," Var said. "Don't need to. Just technique." Var leaned forward. "You were telling me that through trial and error, intuition, and repeated exposure to a known toxin, you have rendered this meat edible?" Isaac opened the small cooler next to him and grabbed a bottle of sauce. "That's right. Want a bite?" Var recoiled like Isaac had offered him a live grenade. "No," it said. "But I must report this." "You do that." Isaac slathered the ribs with a thick coat of smoky barbecue sauce, the kind that made your eyes water in a good way. "Tell the Intergalactic Council the humans have done it again. We've weaponized dinner." Var stood slowly, joints cracking like dry twigs. "I do not understand your species." Isaac shrugged. "Most don't. That's why we make great neighbors, unpredictable, stubborn, and always cooking something weird." Later that evening, Isaac sat in the dining tent with a few other human technicians while gnawing on the ribs. The meat was tender, spicy, and just a little gamey, but it beat the nutrient paste the aliens insisted on serving. Across from him, Dr. Paula Jennings wrinkled her nose. "You're still eating that?" "It's fine. The last guy who said that had to get his stomach pumped." Isaac pointed his fork at her. "That was before we figured out the enzyme inhibitors. I flash boil it first now, then marinate it in vinegar for 12 hours. That neutralizes the toxins." She didn't look convinced. "You sure?" "Tested it on myself." "That's not science. That's masochism." He raised his half-eaten rib. "And yet, here I am." The door to the tent zipped open and a junior comms officer poked his head in. "Weller, the council ship just docked. They want to speak with you." Isaac groaned. "Let me guess. It's about the meat." "It's very specifically about the meat." When Isaac arrived at the council chamber aboard the orbiting vessel, the air was cold and smelled faintly of sterilizer. He stood alone before a semicircle of beings, none of whom looked remotely pleased. A gray-skinned adjudicator with a diamond-shaped crest on its forehead leaned forward. "Commander Weller, you have been preparing and consuming the flesh of the Quadrant 6 ungulate?" "I have." "You are aware it contains hematox 9, a protein complex known to be fatal to over 80% of carbon-based life?" "Yes, but only if consumed raw or undercooked." The council murmured in about 9 different languages. A being with translucent skin raised a hand. "You are claiming that by applying heat you have chemically altered the hematox 9 complex?" "I'm not claiming. I tested it. Extensively." "On what subjects?" "Myself." Another wave of murmurs. The gray adjudicator narrowed its eyes. "And you are still alive?" Isaac gestured to himself. "Last I checked." A screen behind the council lit up with data. Charts, graphs, metabolic breakdowns. Apparently, Var had submitted his little field report with great enthusiasm. "Then we must see a demonstration," the adjudicator said. "Fine. But I'm gonna need my grill." Back on the surface, Isaac prepped a full rack of ribs while a dozen aliens formed a semicircle around him at a safe distance. He explained each step: flash boiling, the vinegar bath, the dry rub, the slow roast. They observed with the intensity of a bomb squad watching a man juggle grenades. When the ribs were done, he plated them, sliced off a piece, and ate it. The council members waited. He chewed, swallowed, burped softly. Delicious, he said. Var leaned in. You did not die. Not even a little. The adjudicator turned to its aide. Send a sample to the biolabs. We must verify his claims. Isaac held up the rest of the rack. You want a taste? Var looked to the adjudicator, who gave a slight nod. The alien took a sliver, examined it, and then placed it on his tongue with the delicacy of someone expecting immediate detonation. Nothing happened. Var blinked. It is peppery. Smoked paprika, Isaac said. And a hint of brown sugar. Over the next 2 days, samples of the meat were run through every test the council had. The results were conclusive. When prepared exactly as Isaac described, the hematox 9 complex denatured completely. A press conference was called. Cameras hovered. Reporters in shimmering robes asked rapid-fire questions. Isaac stood at the podium, slightly sunburned and wearing his stained apron. So what's next, Commander? One asked. Next? I open a food stall. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But he wasn't joking. Within a week, Weller's Smokehouse was open near the main spaceport. The sign was handmade and crooked, but the line stretched around the block. Aliens of every shape and size queued up for a taste of the modified meat that had once been a death sentence. Some were hesitant, others enthusiastic. One three-eyed creature from Sector 9 fainted after a single bite. Turned out it was from joy, not poison. Var visited often, though he never admitted he liked the food. You've altered the galactic understanding of toxin mitigation, he said one afternoon, chewing slowly. I just wanted a decent meal, Isaac replied. But not everyone was pleased. A faction from the vegan coalition of Zell protested outside the stall daily, holding signs that read, meat is murder even if it's cooked, and death-free diets for a harmonious galaxy. One of them hurled a synthetic tomato at Isaac's head. He ducked. Hey, I grew the real ones myself, you know. Tensions escalated when a batch of improperly marinated meat made a customer sick. The council shut the stall down pending investigation. Isaac cooperated fully. The issue turned out to be a faulty temperature probe. He replaced it, retrained his staff, and submitted new cooking protocols. After a month, Weller's Smokehouse reopened. But the incident left a mark. Isaac started keeping meticulous logs, running test batches, and refusing to serve meat unless it passed a dozen safety checks. The council appointed him as a culinary safety liaison, a title he found hilarious but took seriously. Never thought I'd change the universe with barbecue, he said to Paula over coffee one morning. She raised her mug. To toxic meat and stubborn cooks. He grinned. To cooking it long enough that it stops trying to kill you. And so, under the stars of a foreign sky, with a recipe born out of desperation and stubbornness, Issac Weller did what humans do best. He adapted, cooked, and turned danger into dinner. The third Tuesday of the month was usually quiet. Not today. A pair of Narnexians were pacing outside Weller's Smokehouse, both wrapped in identical utility cloaks, nervously clutching a datapad between them like it might squirm away. One of them, the taller one, was muttering to himself in clipped bursts that didn't translate cleanly through the portable interpreter. Inside, Isaac was hunched over a low stainless steel table, carefully trimming the connective tissue from a new batch of local fauna recently cleared for culinary experimentation. Its flesh was pale violet and dense, almost rubbery, and reacted to salt by turning translucent. He hadn't figured out what that meant yet. Tell them to wait, he said without looking up. They've been out there for over an hour, said Paula, who was elbow-deep in charts on a separate monitor. I think they're scared. I'm not a therapist. They're from the Faculty of Ingestive Biology. Isaac paused. The ones from the floating citadel? Yup. They docked this morning. He sighed, wiped his hands on a cloth, and stepped outside. The taller Narnexian froze mid-step. The shorter one dropped the datapad, scrambled to pick it up, and then held it out like an offering. We come with request, the tall one said, its voice gravelly and uneven, like a landline with bad reception. We wish to observe your methods. Closely. Isaac nodded slowly. You're here to see how I don't die. The shorter one made a series of popping noises before translating. To verify resilience. to understand your species' response to unstable protein constructs, to test replication potential. You're gonna want a lab coat. They followed him inside, ducking under the low entrance flap. Inside, every surface gleamed from obsessive cleaning. The air was warm, tinged with hickory smoke and something faintly metallic. Isaac pointed to the corner. Sanitize first. No exceptions. The taller Narnexian hesitated, then dipped his elongated fingers into the sterilization sink, wincing at the temperature. The smaller one followed, then shook its hands dry like a dog. We have minimal practice with heat-based methods, it said. Thermal application is inefficient for our metabolism. That's why I'm still the only one doing it. He pulled out 3 sealed containers from the cooler. One held prepped meat recently marinated, vacuum-sealed, tagged with timestamps accurate to the second. Another had control samples. The third was labeled post-treatment, not for consumption, in 3 languages. We'll start with the muscle tissue from the black-crested herbivore, he said. High in albumin analogs. Turns gelatinous if you overcook it. But at exactly 160 degrees for 28 minutes, it denatures the embedded neurotoxins. The taller Narnexian leaned in, eyes twitching. Your instruments. They do not resemble standard calibration devices. I built them myself, Isaac said. Had to. The local enzymes were corroding the council models. You engineered toxin-resistant instruments. With what materials? Old drone parts. And a broken rice cooker. The smaller Narnexian looked at him with something bordering on reverence. They spent the next 3 hours documenting everything. Each step was logged, cross-referenced with biochemical readings, and recorded from multiple angles. The taller one kept muttering notes into a subdermal recorder while the other took temperature readings from beneath the grill with a handheld spectrometer that whined every time it got too close. At one point, the meat began to release a faint blue vapor. The smaller Narnexian fumbled its notes and backed up a full meter. Reaction phase, Isaac said. It's harmless unless you inhale it directly. Learn that the fun way. They didn't ask how. Later, once the sample had cooled, Isaac sliced off a piece and handed it to the taller alien with a sanitized tongue. We are biologically unsuited for ingestion, it said. Good, he replied. I wasn't offering. He popped the piece into his mouth and chewed slowly. The texture was still off, slightly rubbery, but the flavor had improved since the last trial. Less bitterness. A hint of something citrusy, probably from the new acid wash. You're recording metabolic data? He asked. The smaller Narnexian gestured to the scanner mounted near his chest. Core temperature stable. No spike in immunologic response. Neurological activity within expected parameters. Digestive phase initiated. Then we're good. The taller one leaned closer. We wish to build a simulation of your digestive tract. That's ambitious. For modeling, it added hastily. To test compounds without risking organismal failure. Isaac considered. You'll need a reactor chamber that can mimic bile acid fluctuations. And something that simulates peristalsis. They both blinked. Muscle contractions, he clarified. You'll need to make it squish. The next day, a delegation from the Zentari Preservation Circle arrived without warning. Unlike the Narnexians, they wore ceremonial garments woven from crystalline threads that hummed when they moved. Their leader was a tall, eyeless being with a crescent-shaped head and no discernible mouth, communicating via a modulated pulse device. You have consumed a species protected under the harmonic accord, it said. Isaac wiped his hands on an apron. Which one? The one you refer to as black-crested herbivore. He walked over to the storage unit and pulled the tag from the meat container. This was approved by the Nutritional Ethics Board 3 weeks ago. Our records differ. Paula stepped in, holding a digital receipt. We cross-checked every acquisition. That animal was reclassified after a population surge in the eastern wetlands. It's no longer protected. You accessed restricted bioterritorial data? The Zentari asked. We asked nicely, she said. The crystal threads shimmered in what Isaac assumed was annoyance. We require an audit of your entire inventory, it said. Fine, he replied. But if you touch the spice rack, we're gonna have issues. Over the next 6 hours, the Zentari scanned every container, cataloged every label, and even checked the fermentation chamber in the back. They found nothing that violated current regulations. Still, they left behind a monitor drone for ongoing compliance. After they departed, Issac collapsed onto a bench. "I'm gonna start labeling everything with sarcasm," he muttered. Paula didn't look up. "Already ahead of you." The vinegar vats listed as volatile acid bath for ritual cleansing. By the following week, the Narnexians had constructed a prototype of the digestive simulator. It looked like a clear cylinder filled with layers of shifting gel, surrounded by heating coils and lined with artificial muscle tissue that contracted at regular intervals. It made a horrible sloshing noise every 30 seconds. "We named it Weller Unit 1, the taller one said. Issac stared. "You built a fake stomach. For science." He watched as they injected a small piece of treated meat into the chamber. The gel shifted, the coils glowed, and after 10 minutes the meat had broken down into harmless slurry. The monitor lit up green. "It works," the smaller one said softly. Issac nodded. "Now try it with the red striped flyer. That one's a real bastard." The following day, the council sent a representative from the Department of Dietary Risk Management. A square-jawed humanoid with cybernetic implants and a voice like someone chewing gravel. "You're causing bureaucratic turbulence," he said. "I'm making lunch," Issac replied. "You've created a precedent. Other species are beginning to test these methods. Some without your caution. Then maybe they should hire better cooks." The man leaned in, his breath metallic. "This isn't a kitchen anymore. It's an experiment." Issac didn't blink. "Everything's an experiment. Some of us just write it down." The man left without another word. That evening, Paula brought 2 bowls of stew to the observation deck where Issac was watching the gas giant rise over the horizon. "One of the Narnexians tried to grill something today," she said. "Set off the fire suppression system." "Twice." He took a bowl, sniffed. "This the flyer meat?" "Yeah. With lemon root." He took a bite, nodded slowly. "Still needs work. But it's not trying to kill me." She raised her spoon. "Progress." Below them, the smokehouse's lights glowed in the growing dark. The line outside was shorter now, but more diverse. A sign near the entrance read, "All meals tested. All warnings posted. No refunds for unexpected enlightenment." Issac leaned back against the railing. "You think they'll ever get used to us?" Paula took another bite. "No. But they'll keep showing up anyway." He grinned. "That's the human way." And somewhere below, the Weller Unit 1 sloshed contentedly, digesting the future one bite at a time. The meat had turned orange. Not bright or fluorescent, just a dull, papery orange like overcooked pumpkin flesh. Issac frowned at the slab on the cutting board, poked it with the back of a spoon, then leaned closer to sniff. "Smells like damp celery," he said. Across the table, the Valari biochemist blinked both sets of eyelids in unison. "That is consistent with early-stage glycotoxin destabilization. The pigment shift is harmless." Issac turned the slab over. "You sure? If improperly managed, it might induce temporary numbness in extremities. But only in species lacking hepatic bifurcation. Your kind has redundant filtration. You'll be fine." "I don't love how often I hear that." The Valari, whose name sounded like 2 pebbles dropped into syrup, adjusted the cuffs of its sterile gloves and took a sample with long tweezers. "We have monitored 73 of your meals. No adverse reactions. Yet your culinary process remains dangerously imprecise." "Dangerous is relative," Issac said. "You people think boiling water is a biohazard. We sterilize through ionization. You ever tried soup?" The Valari stared at him, then turned away and began slicing the sample into wafer-thin slivers, each one placed onto a sterile slide. Issac went back to his own prep. The new meat, harvested under council supervision from a burrow-dwelling quadruped with a triple stomach, had muscle fibers that resisted both heat and blade. He'd already snapped one knife and scorched the surface of another sample without cooking the interior. He reached for a meat tenderizer the size of a camping lantern and started hammering with short, rhythmic strikes. "You'll rupture the protein lattice," the Valari warned. "That's the idea," he said. "Otherwise it just bounces." There were now 4 aliens in the kitchen, each representing a different species or research body. The council had insisted on full transparency after the last incident with the misclassified creature, and the result was an audience of quiet observers taking notes in synchronized silence. A translucent being named Rickson hovered near the spice rack. Your species adds particulates post-preparation? Spices, Isaac said. Flavor agents. They don't just mask taste, they change the chemical profile. Some of them block bitter receptors or enhance umami response. That's why I use them. Rickson floated closer. Your digestive system relies on subjective experience to determine edibility? Isaac dropped the tenderizer. We start with survival, then we aim for satisfaction. The Valari handed him a datasheet. This compound, it said, pointing to a chart near the bottom, has a melting point above your standard cooking temperature. You will not achieve denaturation without increasing thermal application by 30%. Isaac studied the numbers. That'll dry it out. Then it will remain toxic. He frowned. Not if I use pressure. Heat plus compression accelerates protein breakdown. If I keep it sealed, I can raise the internal temp without losing moisture. Your equipment is not designed for that. I'll modify the chamber. You will explode it. That's why I'll be careful. He spent the next 2 hours retrofitting an old containment oven, replacing the cracked seals with flexible tubing salvaged from a decommissioned coolant unit. The pressure gauge was analog and temperamental, so he added a fail-safe valve using a repurposed irrigation sensor. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. By dusk, the meat was sealed inside. He set the timer, adjusted the heat, and stepped back. The chamber hissed as it built pressure. Inside, the orange slab began to sweat. One of the observers, a trellic with 6 arms and a nervous gait, shifted closer. You are confident this will neutralize the toxin? If I'm wrong, Isaac said, I won't be around to argue. The chamber held steady. 35 minutes later, he released the valve. Steam burst out in a shrieking jet. The slab inside had darkened to a deep brown, its surface puckered and glistening. He sliced off the edge and watched the juices pool. He took a bite. The room fell silent. He chewed, nodded once, then swallowed. Tender. Earthy. Weird aftertaste, but nothing sharp. The Valari scanned him immediately. No histamine spike. No hepatic stress. Pulse elevated but stable. Just adrenaline, Isaac said. I've never pressure-cooked a toxin before. The trellic leaned closer. May I sample? You've got a bifurcated liver? Yes. Isaac handed over a sliver. The trellic placed it on its tongue and chewed with care. Savory. Slightly metallic. No discomfort. The remaining observers exchanged glances. Rickson floated to the front of the group. You have achieved neutralization through mechanical force and thermal precision. I told you, Isaac said, wiping his hands. We cook it long enough, it's safe. But it was not merely duration, Rickson said. It was pressure, moisture retention, and enzyme suppression. This is a composite method. Isaac nodded toward the modified chamber. That thing is a pressure cooker. We've had them for centuries. We just never used them on alien meat before. The Valari began compiling the data into a formal report. This process must be codified. Shared. Standardized. Go ahead, Isaac said. But good luck explaining it without taste. The trellic was already chewing another sliver. This may be the only known example of toxin mitigation through culinary engineering. Then I guess I'm a food engineer. You are an anomaly, said the Valari. A human anomaly. Isaac turned back to the slab, sliced another piece, and plated it. That's the default setting. The observers dispersed over the next few hours, each carrying a sealed sample and a data packet. The council drone still hovered near the entrance, humming quietly, its sensors aimed at the kitchen. Just after the second moonrise, Paula entered with a box under her arm. Got your replacement thermocouples. Perfect timing. I think the old ones are melting. She set the box down and peered into the cooling chamber. That the new meat? Cooked under pressure. Turns out it's edible if you bully it hard enough. She laughed once, then leaned against the counter. You know they're talking about naming the method after you? I hope not. I don't want to be remembered as the guy who cooked poison. Too late. He scrubbed the cutting board clean. I didn't fix anything. I just didn't quit. That's why it worked. For a moment, silence settled over the kitchen, broken only by the soft tick of the cooling oven. Then Paula opened the box and pulled out a set of gleaming thermocouples, each one rated for extreme pressure variance. "You gonna try the wing thing next?" she asked. "Nope. Too acidic. I'll let someone else take that one." She raised an eyebrow. "You passing on a challenge? I've earned a break. For once, I want to eat something that doesn't threaten to rearrange my DNA." He rinsed the last of the tools, shut off the lights, and hung his apron by the door. Outside, the stars had shifted and the air smelled faintly of scorched grass from a recent atmospheric burn-off. As they walked toward the mess tent, Paula glanced sideways. "You know this'll be in the council archives forever, right? Let em read it over lunch." And with that, the chapter closed not with a dramatic flourish or a grand declaration, but with two people walking quietly through the dark, leaving behind a kitchen where danger had been dismantled with little more than heat, pressure, and the stubborn refusal to give up on dinner.